Pain has a strange way of changing us. Sometimes it arrives suddenly, like a door being slammed shut without warning. Other times, it builds quietly until one day we realize that something inside us has changed. A relationship ends, a dream collapses, someone disappoints us, we fail at something we believed we were capable of achieving, or life simply becomes heavier than we expected. And when pain arrives, our first instinct is usually to escape it. We distract ourselves. We stay busy. We pretend we're fine. We tell ourselves that we just need more time. But what if pain isn't only something you have to survive? What if it can become something you use? When you're hurting, it can feel impossible to imagine a future where that pain becomes useful. In the moment, pain doesn't feel like a teacher. It feels like an enemy. It consumes your attention. It changes the way you see yourself. It makes yesterday feel better than today and tomorrow feel impossible to imagine. But pain contains information. It reveals what mattered to you. It exposes what you were depending on. It shows you where you were vulnerable, where you were unprepared, and sometimes where you were living a life that wasn't aligned with who you were becoming. The goal isn't to pretend the pain doesn't exist. The goal is to understand it. There is an important difference between pain and suffering. Pain is what happens to you. Suffering is often what happens when you continue fighting the reality of what happened. You can't always control the event that caused the pain. You can, however, eventually choose what meaning you give it. A broken relationship doesn't automatically mean you are unlovable. A failed business doesn't automatically mean you're incapable. Rejection doesn't automatically mean you're inadequate. Losing something doesn't mean your life has lost its value. The event happened. The pain is real. But the story you build around that pain is still being written. One of the most dangerous things pain can do is convince you that your current emotional state is your permanent identity. You don't just think, I'm hurting. You start thinking, I am broken. You don't just think, I failed. You start thinking, I am a failure. You don't just think, someone rejected me. You start thinking, I'm not worthy. This is where you have to become careful. An experience is not an identity. A chapter is not the entire book. What happened to you may become part of your story, but it doesn't have to become the definition of who you are. Sometimes the first step toward turning pain into power is simply allowing yourself to experience it without running away. You don't have to immediately find the lesson. You don't have to turn every painful experience into motivation by tomorrow morning. Sometimes you need to sit with what happened. Admit that it hurt. Admit that you're disappointed. Admit that you missed someone. Admit that you expected more from yourself. Strength doesn't mean pretending that nothing affects you. Strength means being honest about what affects you without allowing it to control your entire future. Once the initial emotional storm begins to settle, start asking better questions. Not, why did this happen to me? Not, why is my life so unfair? Those questions can keep you trapped inside the event. Instead, ask, what is this experience showing me? What did I ignore? What did I underestimate? What did I learn about myself? What do I need to change? What will I never tolerate again? What skill do I need to develop? What boundary do I need to establish? Pain becomes useful when you stop asking only why it happened and start asking what you're going to do with what happened. Think about an engineer investigating a machine that failed. The engineer doesn't insult the machine. He doesn't sit beside it saying, this machine is worthless. He studies the failure. Where did the system break? What caused the problem? Was there too much pressure? Was a component weak? Was maintenance ignored? What needs to change before the system operates again? You can approach your own life in the same way. Instead of using pain as evidence that you're worthless, use it as data. Examine the experience. Learn from it. Improve the system. Pain also reveals what you need to let go of. Sometimes we don't suffer because something is still happening. We suffer because we keep mentally recreating something that already ended. We replay conversations. We imagine different decisions. We wonder what would have happened if we had acted differently. But the past doesn't need your permission to remain the past. Eventually, you have to stop negotiating with what already happened. You can learn from it without living inside it. You can remember without returning. You can appreciate what something taught you without needing it to come back. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means refusing to allow the past to occupy every available space in your present. There are things you may never get an apology for. There are people who may never understand how deeply they hurt you. There are opportunities that may never return. Waiting for perfect closure can become another form of imprisonment. Sometimes closure is a decision you make privately. This happened, it mattered, it hurt, and I am choosing to continue anyway. Then comes one of the most powerful transformations, movement. When you're in pain, your mind wants to stay still. It wants to analyze everything. It wants to replay everything, but action interrupts that loop. Go for a walk, exercise, clean your room, finish the task you've been avoiding, learn something difficult, build something with your hands. Action won't magically erase your pain, but it can remind your brain that you still have agency. You may not control everything that happened to you, but you still control what you do next. Pain can either shrink your world or expand your capacity. Think about physical training. Your muscles become stronger because they encounter resistance. Without resistance, there is no reason for adaptation. Life works differently, but the principle is similar. Difficult experiences can force you to develop patience, discipline, boundaries, emotional intelligence, independence, courage, and resilience. None of these qualities appear because life is easy. They develop because life demands them from you. But don't romanticize pain. Not every painful experience is good. Not every tragedy has some beautiful hidden purpose. Some things simply hurt. Some experiences are unfair. Some losses cannot be explained. Turning pain into power does not mean saying, I'm glad this happened. It means saying, I refuse to let what happened destroy everything that comes next. That's a different mindset. You don't have to be grateful for the wound to become stronger while healing it. Start rebuilding in small pieces. When your life feels overwhelming, don't try to rebuild the entire future in one day. Choose one habit, one responsibility, one promise you can keep to yourself. Wake up at the time you said you would. Exercise for 30 minutes. Read 10 pages. Work for one focused hour. Call someone you trust. Finish one task. Small promises kept repeatedly create something powerful. Self-trust. And when you've lost confidence in yourself, self-trust is one of the first things you need to rebuild. Pain often destroys confidence because it gives us evidence of what went wrong. Your job is to deliberately create new evidence. Every completed workout becomes evidence. Every difficult conversation handled maturely becomes evidence. Every deadline you meet becomes evidence. Every time you resist an old destructive habit becomes evidence. Confidence doesn't always arrive before action. Sometimes confidence is the result of repeatedly proving to yourself that you can act even when you don't feel ready. Pain can also force you to reconsider your direction. Maybe the life you were chasing wasn't actually yours. Maybe you were trying to impress people who were never going to be satisfied. Maybe you were pursuing a career because it looked successful rather than because it meant something to you. Maybe you stayed in relationships because you feared starting over. Sometimes pain doesn't destroy your path. It exposes that you were walking down the wrong one. One of the greatest forms of power is clarity. Knowing what you want, knowing what you don't want, knowing what you're willing to sacrifice for, knowing what you will no longer sacrifice yourself for. Pain has a way of making priorities clear. Suddenly, the things that once seemed incredibly important don't matter as much. You stop chasing approval. You stop needing everyone to understand you. You stop wasting energy trying to control other people's opinions. Your attention becomes more valuable because you've learned what happens when you give it to the wrong things. Protect that clarity. When you're rebuilding yourself, be careful about what you consume. Constant comparison can make your healing feel slower than it actually is. Other people's highlight reels can make your ordinary progress look insignificant. Give your mind space to think. You don't need to know what everyone else is doing. You need to know what you're doing. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is put the phone down and return your attention to the life directly in front of you. Don't try to carry everything alone. There is strength in asking for help. Talk to someone you trust, a friend, a mentor, a family member, a professional if you need one. Pain becomes heavier when it stays locked inside your head. Sometimes another person doesn't need to solve your problem. They simply need to help you see it from another angle. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It is the willingness to tell the truth about where you are so you can finally begin moving from there. Resilience doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb. In fact, the strongest people aren't necessarily the people who feel the least. They're often the people who can feel deeply without allowing every emotion to dictate their behavior. Anger can be felt without becoming cruelty. Sadness can be felt without becoming surrender. Fear can be felt without becoming avoidance. Pain can be felt without becoming your identity. Emotional strength is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to choose your response while emotion is present. Every time you choose a better response, you're building psychological strength. You don't become resilient by reading about resilience. You become resilient by practicing it. You practice staying calm when things go wrong. You practice starting again after disappointment. You practice having difficult conversations. You practice keeping commitments. You practice getting back to work when motivation disappears. The repetition matters. Strength isn't created in one dramatic moment. It's built quietly through hundreds of ordinary decisions. Your scars can become part of your craftsmanship. The things you've survived can teach you how to recognize pain in others. Failure can teach you how to prepare. Rejection can teach you how to detach your identity from approval. Loneliness can teach you how to build a stronger relationship with yourself. Hardship can teach you what truly matters. Your experiences don't automatically make you wise. Reflection does. The lesson appears when you are willing to look honestly at what happened and ask how you can become better because of it. Don't build your new identity entirely around what hurt you. This is another trap. You don't want to spend the next 10 years saying, I'm the person who survived that. Survival was the beginning, not the destination. You are allowed to become someone beyond your pain. You can build a career, create a family, learn a craft, travel, serve others, build a business, become physically stronger, become emotionally wiser. Your past can explain you without controlling you. Think about what happens when you stop asking, how do I get back to who I was? And start asking, who can I become now? That's the turning point. You may never become the exact person you were before the pain, and that's okay. Maybe you're not supposed to. Some experiences permanently change your priorities. Some make you more careful. Some make you more compassionate. Some make you stronger. Growth doesn't always mean returning to your old shape. Sometimes it means becoming something new. Eventually, there comes a moment when you stop waiting to feel completely healed before you start living again. This is important because healing isn't always a feeling. Sometimes healing is behavior. You go to work, you exercise, you meet people, you create, you laugh again, you make plans, you allow yourself to experience happiness without feeling guilty for moving on. You realize that moving forward doesn't betray the person you were, the dream you lost, or the life that ended. Moving forward is how you honor the life that still remains. Pain can also give you a deeper reason to work. When you know what it feels like to lose, you stop taking progress for granted. When you've experienced rejection, you understand the value of opportunity. When you've been underestimated, you develop a different relationship with effort. You stop expecting life to hand you everything. You begin building, quietly, consistently, without needing applause. And that is where pain begins to transform into power, not when the pain disappears, but when it becomes fuel for disciplined action. One day, you may look back and realize something unexpected. The period you desperately wanted to escape became the period that taught you the most. The rejection forced you to improve. The failure forced you to change strategy. The heartbreak forced you to understand yourself. The loneliness forced you to become comfortable in your own company. The struggle forced you to discover what you were capable of. You didn't choose the pain, but you chose what you did with it. That's the difference between being defined by pain and being transformed by it. Being defined by pain means the past determines what you believe is possible. Being transformed by pain means the past becomes part of the reason you refuse to quit. You don't have to prove anything to the people who hurt you. You don't need revenge. You don't need their approval. The most powerful response is to build a life so aligned with your values that the old version of you would barely recognize it. Power doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes power looks like getting out of bed when your mind tells you to stay there. Sometimes it looks like saying no. Sometimes it looks like walking away. Sometimes it looks like starting again. Sometimes it looks like forgiving yourself. Sometimes it looks like choosing discipline when motivation is nowhere to be found. And sometimes power is simply refusing to become better because life was hard. You cannot always choose the storm. You can choose whether you keep walking through it. You cannot always choose who stays. You can choose who you become after they leave. You cannot always choose whether you fail. You can choose whether failure teaches you. You cannot always choose what life takes away. You can choose what you build with what remains. That is where your power lies. Your pain may be part of your story, but it doesn't have to be the ending. You can take the disappointment and turn it into discipline. You can take rejection and turn it into determination. You can take loneliness and turn it into self-knowledge. You can take failure and turn it into experience. You can take grief and turn it into appreciation. You can take struggle and turn it into strength. The transformation doesn't happen overnight. It happens every time you decide that what happened will not have the final word. So if you're hurting right now, don't rush yourself into pretending you're okay. Feel what you need to feel. Learn where you can learn. Ask for help when you need it. Give yourself time. But don't surrender your future to your current pain. There is still work to do. There are still people you haven't met. There are still places you haven't seen. There are still skills you haven't mastered. There are still versions of yourself you haven't discovered. Maybe the pain changed you. Let it. Maybe it made you stronger. Use it. Maybe it showed you what matters. Follow it. Maybe it forced you to start over. Then start over with everything you've learned. You don't have to erase your scars. You don't have to hide the chapters that hurt. Carry them differently. Let them remind you of what you survived, what you learned, and what you're capable of becoming. Because pain can break you. Pain can humble you. Pain can change you. But when you choose to learn, act, rebuild, and keep moving forward, pain can become power. And your story isn't over yet. Your pain is part of your story, but it does not have to be the end of it. Turn the wound into wisdom. Turn the lesson into action. Turn the struggle into strength. And turn the life you have left into something meaningful.